Hello and welcome to Real Obscure. My name is Kevin H. Shaw, and tonight we're in for a devilishly good time as we encounter mysterious murders, sinister sorcery, and macabre manifestations in one of the undisputed classics of the horror genre. From 1957, it's the superbly sinister Night of the Demon. So before we get into it, a quick comment on the movie's title. In the US it was retitled Curse of the Demon to avoid confusion with the similarly titled, but not really that similar, Night of the Iguana. There were also a few other changes made to the US cut, but stick around and you'll hear more about that later. Now there's also a movie from 1980 which borrows the movie's name, but the demon in question here is in fact a Bigfoot. And then there's the 1983 Linnea Quigley movie, Night of the Demons, plural, which further adds to the confusion. Just to be clear, the movie I'm talking about here is the black and white supernatural shocker directed by Jacques Tourneur and based on the story by the great M.R. James. So now we're all on the same cursed page, let's take a look at the movie's production and background. As I mentioned, Night of the Demon was directed by Jacques Tourneur, a French director who moved to the US in 1914 at the age of 10 and began his career in movie making while still in high school. His father, Maurice, was also a director of silent movies and worked extensively in America, directing a slew of movies, many of which are now sadly lost. But his works included a 1920 adaptation of Treasure Island and Last of the Mohicans. In 1925, Tourneur Sr. and Jr. returned to France, but the two became estranged over Jacques Tourneur's romantic involvement with a French actress, and so he returned to Hollywood in 1934. During his time there, he met producer Val Lewton, and when Lewton was charged by RKO with creating a series of horror movies to compete with Universal's, he turned to Tourneur for his first foray into horror, Cat People. This movie personifies Tourneur's mastery of shadow and atmosphere, something he'd continue to showcase in his later movies with Lewton, including I Walked with a Zombie and The Leopard Man, and of course the subject of tonight's movie, Night of the Demon. The movie is a loose adaptation of Casting the Runes, written by the legendary author of ghost stories M.R. James. Montague Rhodes James, to give him his full name, was born in 1862 and was a respected scholar, specialising in the translation of medieval manuscripts. He was the provost of King's College, Cambridge, and later Eton College, as well as serving as Vice-Chancellor of the College of Cambridge. As an amusement, he began writing ghost stories to be read aloud to a select audience of friends and students, often at Christmas, but rose to prominence in the field of fiction with the publication of his first collected volume, Ghost Stories of an Antiquary. A further 3 collections followed during his lifetime, and to this day he is still regarded as one of the finest authors of the ghost story. The BBC has adapted a number of his stories for their Ghost Story for Christmas series, and his work continues to be popular in print and in audiobook form. So, what's it all about? We begin with a voiceover explaining the history of the runes, how ancient man carved them upon the monoliths of Stonehenge, and that using these runes man can call forth the ancient powers of darkness to do his bidding, to this very day. And as the opening credits roll, we're treated to the movie's wonderful score, written by Clifton Parker. Parker was the composer of such scores as Treasure Island in 1950 and the 1959 adaptation of The 39 Steps, which is actually my favourite version of the story and also has another connection to this movie which we'll learn about later. The music in this movie is truly superb, and Parker immediately sets the tone with this opening salvo, with its swirling elemental strings and bombastic brass stabs. And so the movie introduces us to Professor Harrington. He's played by Maurice Denham, an actor you'll surely recognise from his appearances in movies such as Sink the Bismarck, Those Magnificent Men in Their Flying Machines, Torture Garden, and Countess Dracula. Doctor Who fans will probably know him best from his appearance in the Sixth Doctor's adventure, The Twin Dilemma. Harrington is driving through the night like a man possessed, throwing his car through corners with ill regard as he races through the darkness of a tree-lined country lane. It's classic Tourneur, with the car's headlights barely illuminating the darkness and casting hard, dark shadows, all accompanied by Parker's wonderful, swirling, frantic score. He arrives at Luffield Hall and is granted a meeting with the hall's owner, Julian Carswell. Carswell is played by Niall McGuinness, an actor probably best known for his role as MacMorris in the Laurence Olivier adaptation of Henry V, and Zeus in the 1963 Ray Harryhausen classic Jason and the Argonauts. He had an extensive stage and screen career before retiring in the 70s to return to his original career as a doctor in his native Ireland. Harrington begs Carswell to call it off, and that if he does, he will issue a public apology regarding his comments about Carswell, that he's seen it and that he was wrong. Carswell explains that he warned him to leave him alone. Harrington refused and told him to do his worst, which is precisely what Carswell did. Harrington offers to call off his investigation, to publish an apology, and to tell Holden, when he arrives, that he was wrong. Carswell accepts the apology, but again asks that he and his followers be left alone. Harrington agrees, but Carswell becomes distracted by the tolling of a mantelpiece clock. He hurriedly asks Harrington if he still has the parchment he gave him. He explains that he does not, and that it burned. Hearing this, Carswell quickly ushers Harrington out, promising he'll do what he can to help him. Harrington returns to his home, believing himself now safe. However, he soon becomes aware of a strange chittering sound, and as he looks on in horror, he sees a ball of smoke manifest into the form of a hideous demonic entity. He attempts to flee but becomes entangled in fallen electrical cables and is literally scared to death as the demon advances upon him. Now, the appearance of the demon on screen is something that always comes up when discussing this movie. The story goes that Tourneur and writer Charles Bennett did not want to show the demon, but producer Hal E. Chester did want to include the demon as an on-screen manifestation, and in the end, he won. I understand Tourneur's frustrations, as his earlier horror movies are very subtle and rely much more on suggestion and atmosphere than outright shocks. But the thing is, it could have been a lot worse, as the design of the demon is really good, and has since the movie's release become something of a horror icon. Anyway, after Harrington's untimely death, we're introduced to the aforementioned Holden, Dr. John Holden specifically, played by Dana Andrews. Andrews began his career in the 40s and is probably best known, Night of the Demon aside, for his roles in such movies as Laura, 1944, and The Oxbow Incident, 1943. He was also president of the Screen Actors Guild in 1963, and in the 70s had a relatively successful career playing guest spots in TV shows such as Ironside and The Love Boat. Now, in a great bit of storytelling, we meet Holden as he tries to sleep on a transatlantic flight, a newspaper over his face. Now, what's so smart about this? Well, the newspaper just so happens to feature his photograph with the headline, "Prominent Psychologist Flies to London for International Conference." We're given a moment to read this, and then the paper slides down to reveal Holden in person. It's a really nice little touch, and it's a great way to fast track his introduction and set the plot up. At this point we're also introduced to our female lead, Joanna Harrington, played by Peggy Cummins. The child of Irish parents, she was born in Wales but grew up in Ireland, later moving to London to continue her education. A child star, she appeared in a number of British stage plays before graduating to appearing in British movies, including an entry in the Old Mother Riley series and her breakout role English Without Tears. She worked briefly in the US, appearing in Moss Rose in 1944, Escape, and Greengrass in Wyoming, both in 1948. After a brief return to the UK, she once again returned to the USA to film 1950s Gun Crazy, before once more returning to her native Britain, working at Ealing Studios on Meet Mr. Lucifer in 1953 and a string of other comedies and dramas before retiring in the mid-60s. Now the two characters get off on the wrong foot, with Holden annoyed that Joanna is writing letters and her overhead light is interfering with his sleep. It's a nice little meet cute, and as you can imagine, the two go from this initially hostile encounter to later working together to solve the mystery of Harrington's death, and also becoming romantically involved. But we're jumping a little bit ahead there. Holden arrives in England and is informed of Harrington's passing. Undeterred, however, he insists he will continue the professor's work and make a statement regarding Carswell and his followers. But just as Carswell took action to stop Harrington, so too does Holden find himself haunted by a mysterious, unseen something, and soon learns that his days are literally numbered. Now, to say much more about the plot is to do it a disservice, as part of what makes this movie such an enjoyable and scary experience is the visual style and flair of Tourneur. Every shot is an exercise in mood, with long, hard shadows and empty dark spaces dominating the scenes. But essentially, we learn that Carswell has given Holden a piece of parchment upon which are written a series of runic symbols. And in doing so, he has set a demon from hell upon the psychologist, who must not only figure out a way to lift the curse, but also begins to question his own reality, because as a skeptic, he simply cannot accept that witchcraft and demonology can exist, and even worse, actually affect a man of science like himself. Now, this is one of the things about the movie that some people, myself included, find a little irksome. Obviously, Holden is playing the opposite of Carswell. Carswell doesn't have faith in the powers of darkness because he knows they're real. He's commanded them and seen what they can do, and also knows that the pacts he has made for his success and power come at a price, and that one day he may have to pay that price in full. Holden, meanwhile, is a man so convinced that such things cannot be real that rather than being a true skeptic, in the sense that he wants proof, he comes off as being stubborn and pig-headed. He has no interest in actual evidence because he simply refuses to accept that he could be wrong. Ironically, McGuinness's Carswell actually comes off as the more charismatic and even jovial of the two. He's charming, he makes jokes, he even throws a Halloween party at his manor for the local children and takes care of his elderly mother. It's only when he's threatened by outsiders that he actually unleashes the powers of darkness, at least as far as we see, and is definitely the more likeable of the two male leads, despite his connection to the dark arts. Anyway, through the course of the movie, Holden does indeed begin to come under the spell of Carswell's curse. At first he passes it off as Carswell simply playing mind games, tampering with his diary for example, to remove pages past his time allowed. But as his end approaches, he begins to grudgingly see that perhaps there is something to the curse. Now, I don't want to go into too many details, but there are a few points I want to mention, with a couple of scenes I want to draw particular attention to, as they are superb. Holden and Carswell's first encounter in the British Library is a wonderful scene, with Carswell, ever the gentleman, offering to let Holden read his personal copy of a text that's unavailable at the library. Again, like I said, Carswell is charming and accommodating to Holden's blunt and brusque know-it-all. Okay, so Carswell was responsible for Harrington's death, but he did give him plenty of warnings before setting the demon upon him. Anyway, there's a great shot of Carswell leaving after he's handed the parchment to Holden, where we see from the latter's perspective that reality is already beginning to sway and bend in the first stages of the curse. And there's a wonderful scene where Holden and Joanna, at the request of Carswell's mother, attend a séance with a medium called Mr. Meek. He's played by Reginald Beckwith of the 39 Steps, 1959, and Night of the Eagle fame. Mr. Meek channels a variety of spirits before making contact with Harrington, and in a scene that's since been sampled and made famous by Kate Bush on the fantastic Hounds of Love, he announces, "It's in the trees! It's coming! The demon is coming!" Now of note to UK viewers is a scene in which Rand Hobart, a member of Carswell's cult accused of murder, explains how he was chosen for death but was able to avoid his fate by passing on the runic parchment to another. Not only is this a great haunting scene with a fantastic performance, but it's also an early appearance by the actor Brian Wilde, who later went on to star as Foggy in the long-running, i.e. never bloody ending, comedy series The Last of the Summer Wine. The movie is an exercise in atmosphere, from Clifton Parker's ever-present themes and motifs, which are by turns eerie, unsettling, to outright terrifying, to Tourneur's masterful use of shadow and light. It's absolutely swimming in dread and tension, with the movie unfolding in a slow burn of paranoia and mounting fear. Like M.R. James's best writing, it's controlled and subtle, always giving us just enough to build the horror, but without unleashing the terror until the final reel in which... well, that's something for the spoiler zone. Now, Night of the Demon did suffer from that age-old issue of being too slow, according to the US distributors, and so when it was released as Curse of the Demon, it did so with a number of scenes missing. The most damaging cut was the removal of the entire Rand Hobart subplot, which really does hit the movie hard. These scenes are a fantastic bit of proto-folk horror, with Holden meeting with Hobart's family and them turning upon him as an outsider in a scene that features some truly haunting visuals. So if you are going to track this movie down, please be sure to watch the original UK cut, which runs at 96 minutes compared to the hacked down 82-minute US release. It might not sound much, but those extra 14 minutes really do add so much more to the movie. And if all of this is sounding a little bit familiar, then I'll just say that Koji Suzuki's novel Ring, the Sam Raimi movie Drag Me to Hell, and 2014's It Follows all borrow the concept of passing on a curse to save yourself that is central to this movie. Hell, they even touch on it in Final Destination Bloodlines. But I suppose it just shows you what a fantastic talent M.R. James was, in that the whole idea of passing on a curse was something he came up with over a century ago. Anyway, it's time for us now to step into the spoiler zone. So as Holden's end approaches, he makes it his mission to pass the parchment back to Carswell, in the hopes that he'll be able to escape his fate. Carswell has kidnapped Joanna and is on a train bound out of town, away from Holden. Holden, however, is able to locate him and desperately attempts to pass the runes back to him, offering him a cigarette and attempting to pass his book to him. Carswell, however, is aware of the game Holden is playing and refuses on both counts. But as he leaves the train, he takes his coat from Holden, and as he does so, he realises Holden has outfoxed him. He finds the parchment in his pocket, but a mysterious wind suddenly whips up and the runes fly from his hand. He runs from the train in pursuit, but as he does so, we hear the familiar chittering sound, and Carswell watches in horror as a ball of smoke solidifies into the demon. the demon tears Carswell to shreds, and its work done, vanishes once more. The police on the scene examine the body, declaring that it must have been hit by a train. Holden turns from the scene and leaves with Joanna, safe now from the curse, but forever changed by his experience. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there was a disagreement in the production regarding the actual appearance of the demon. I can see that perhaps it could have been a better movie without ever revealing the demon, but as far as demons go, this one is genuinely great. Yes, it's a puppet being moved by rods and a jaw that's operated by a fishing wire, but I really don't care. It's a great looking character, and yeah, by today's standards it might be a bit creaky, but I kind of like the fact that we get a personified demon rather than an abstract force of evil. I don't know, maybe that's just me and my love of practical effects. Either way, I think that anybody who doesn't really enjoy this movie because the devil puppet ruined it is missing the point. This movie has a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's something I'm totally in agreement with. Give it a watch for yourself and see if you agree too. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of Real Obscure. Real Obscure was created, written, directed and puppeteered by me, Kevin H. Shaw. If you'd like to learn more about the podcast, then please visit our website at realobscurepod.com, where you'll not only find links to the podcast on a variety of platforms, but also news, updates and more. You can also get in touch with us by emailing hellorealobscure@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please like it and share it with your friends. If you didn't, then please share it with people who you hate. We always welcome feedback, so please comment below to tell us what you thought, and be sure to subscribe or follow on your platform of choice. Night of the Demon is copyright 1957. It is used for educational and commentary purposes here under Section 107 of the Copyright Act, Fair Use, and remains the property of the respective copyright holder, presented here for the purposes of critique, commentary and discussion. No copyright infringement is intended. So please don't sue us.